Good. Welcome, everybody. People still arriving in numbers, but we're very pleased to see you all. Welcome to the 92nd EOcafe. I think most people hopefully know the rules, but just as a reminder, please keep your microphones off unless I specifically ask you to join in the discussion. You're very welcome to leave your camera on. It's good to see you. If you have a question, please just pop it into the chat. That gives people an idea of what's coming up. And if we take the question, then I'll call on you to ask your question directly rather than just reading it out. So and please also use the chat for any information. You know, it's a channel for sharing information as well as asking questions. So please feel free to put related information into the chat. So today we're returning to the subject of the future of Copernicus. We've talked about it several times before, more related to upstream and new data sources and funding. But this time we're going to look at it from the perspective of the entrusted entities. In the last EOcafe, I talked with Simonetta Celli, and we talked about the rapid geostrategic changes facing us and how EO is central to the changes and has such an important role to play. Europe has been taking a big step forward towards increasing national and regional defense budgets, including for satellite systems, providing communication and Earth observation. And this is a subject that I hope we can return to later. But Copernicus is a key component of the EU space strategy, and discussions are now taking place on how this will evolve, and particularly with the next funding period starting in 2028. So that's the focus of our discussions today. Now, two of the Copernicus services stand out from an industry perspective, those for security and for land monitoring. And the EARSC Industry Survey over the years has consistently shown these are key interests for the EO service providers in Europe, both for participating in supplying data and services, and also as being a source of data which companies can build businesses upon. So strong commercial interest in the subject, and that reflected probably in the number of people that we've got joining us today. So it's great pleasure to welcome three guests, two from the European Environmental Agency and from the EU Joint Research Centre. These are the entities which are entrusted with the implementation of the Copernicus Land Monitoring Services, the CLMS, whilst EA also implements the cross-cutting coordination for the Copernicus In-Situ Service. So our three guests you can see on the screen. We have Monsieur Donizar Hoyas, who is the Copernicus lead in the EEA, Andreas Brink, who is the project lead for Copernicus, or CLMS more precisely, in the JRC, and Jose Miguel Rubio, who is an expert and working on the in-situ services, and we'll reference that in our discussions today. So as traditionally, I normally ask our guests just to say a few words about themselves to start us off. I hate reading out these potted bios, so I'd much prefer that you say in your own words. So maybe, Yosia, you could kick off and just introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you very much. So my name is indeed Ursula Donizar. I come from Spain. I joined the agency in 2021. So not, and before that I was working for a private company, and I've been working for more than 20 years in remote sensing, in projects related to remote sensing, especially optical remote sensing related to land monitoring.
Okay, Andreas.
Great, thanks. Great pleasure being with this community. Yeah, I got this year my 20-year medal in service, so I'm also in business since quite some time. I'm Italo-German, I always say. have this double background somehow. I'm a geographer specialized in remote sensing, worked some years at the FAO in Rome, so where I got really into this global dimension. And yeah, I'm the lead, let's say, or the co-lead, let's say, with Usue on the land service, looking more on the global dimension since 1.5 years almost. So exciting times. Thank you.
Okay. Jose?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for having me. I'm also Spanish as Usue. I am an engineer in cartography and geodesy, having worked first at the National Mapping Agency in Spain, National Geographic Institute, then for a few years at the European Commission, where I had the opportunity to get to know you. And since 2017 here at the European Environment Agency, where I joined a few years ago, 3 years ago, the Copernicus team as expert in and responsible for the Copernicus In-Situ Component.
That's great, thanks. So, in a sense, as the next, the multi-annual financial framework is starting to build, all of the entrusted entities are starting to define their key priorities for the next phase of Copernicus, Copernicus 3.0. And so the question is, what is likely to appear? What are the likely priorities, and how can industry be involved in that over the next few years? So, as we said just now, European EO Services industry is a key partner of the Copernicus program, both as a supplier of data through contribution missions, a supplier of contracted services, and as a user of both data and services under the free and open data policy. The 2024 EARSC Industry Survey showed the importance of the CLMS to the industry, coming out first among the Copernicus services in all these categories. In addition, industry has continually highlighted the key importance of access to in-situ data. And possibly as suppliers, though maybe that's not so much our sector, but it would be interesting to discuss that. But data, whether in-situ data, whether for calibration, validation, or integrated into the applications. So the priorities set under the next MFF will determine how the Copernicus program will evolve and continue to meet user needs over the next 10 years. The MFF will cover 2028 to 2035. So we're talking 10 years away from here. And with the evolving geopolitical situation, the continued climate crisis and activities around that, Copernicus program is really at a quite critical point. So before we start looking at the evolution and looking ahead, let's take stock of where we are. I imagine most people on the call are familiar with the agencies and the services. But for the background, can I ask each of you to describe shortly how the CLMS and in-situ services are working today, and what are the key factors in the delivery of these services today? So I don't know, I mean, I would naturally start with Usue, but yeah.
Well, I can start, but then give the floor to Andreas, because I also do not want to be the only one speaking. So we are right now in the Copernicus 2.0 phase, indeed. And what we are doing, when we took over, when we started this phase, we were in a moment where there was this report from the European Court of Auditors, where it was saying that the services had been successfully launched, but the user uptake was a bit behind. And so what we have done in these years, so first we needed to look back to be able to look forward as well in the future. So first, take a step back and say, where are we? How does our portfolio look like? How would we like it to look? How would we like it to look in the future? How can we support the users to actually use our data more often? And also in the case of the CLMS, and I can then give the floor to Andreas, how do we want to shape the relationship between EARSC and EEA, not only for this MFF, because this MFF was it was a bit given. I mean, I took over the responsibility in 2022. Andreas only 1 year and a half ago. So we are kind of the new people here, no? Even if we have been working for already 20 years, that we know, we are we can assume it. But anyway, we wanted to shape, we needed to shape, use this MFF to shape how would the CLMS and how would the relationship between entities be in the future. And now I will give the floor to Andreas.
Yes, thank you, Ursula. In a way, especially JRC is involved since the very beginning. Jeff, you may remember Baveno. And that was my first time at the JRC. Actually, I was at that event, and in a way, it's where it all started. And we were there shaping it from the very beginning. And it's really fascinating to see all this evolution and what happened in these times. So the first priority, which I see as a Copernicus service, is of course continuity. No, and this is, yeah, we have to really ensure this operational services which we have to ensure that our users have really access to the data in an easy way also. As Uzo was saying, yeah, users, we have a broad range, but there's much more we can do there, certainly. We really have to reach out much more, not only to the policy DGs, but to a wider spectrum there. And this, again, as one service, as Uzo was saying, in the past, somehow we always had one land service, but it was much more split between a global component and the pan-European. At the beginning, maybe naturally, because it was much more at broader scale globally, but things are moving much more together, and we are really working very much into this direction, in this one service approach, working together on the next steps on the evolution. And we have really a quite well established mechanism, I would say, also now within EEA and JRC on how to work together on, especially when I think of communication, for example, on having one team there in communicating as one service. Not even coming to evolution, there's a lot of things happening right now, and so not only ensuring our products, which in a way are there, but it's this whole new dimension of cloud computing, on moving towards the CDSE. It's a big big elephant in the room, let's say. And so these are things which are not waiting, they cannot wait. So there's a lot of work going into this, into migrating to these new technologies, in adapting to new format standards. So and this is very important, that we do this also together, no, as one service and beyond, as Copernicus in general.
Okay, I mean, in relation to JRC and EEA, the sort of the joint, what in practical terms does it mean in terms of the coordination? Because it's the global land service and the sort of European land service. Where does the interaction lie? Where's that? What is the basis of the collaboration?
Maybe I can just continue, and then Uzo, you come in. We have now a very well-established steering group, let's say, between the two entities, but also DigiDefis, where we meet regularly, discussing all the items of the land service. And under this, we have specific working groups addressing, for example, the CDC component, where we have to work together on this as one service. And on the portfolio, for example, we are analyzing our portfolio, looking eventually where it overlaps, where in the future we can make it more efficient, and things like this. But maybe I hand over to Uswe, who can complement this.
So as Andreas is rightly saying, we have this steering group. So we have we created a governance body to drive the evolution of the service. And this is based, these working groups that he was mentioning, the idea behind that is to analyze the portfolio, to drive the migration to the cloudification of the portfolio, because we are now in this process of migrating to the Copernicus data space ecosystem. But also it is a good tool or a good place to work on the administrative aspects of the agreements that we have with the FIS. So we need, when we are now thinking about the negotiation for the next MFF, to have a joint framework to do that, and also to think about how will the relationship be in the future as well. So if the division between, because as Andreas was saying, in the past there was a clear division based basically on the scale that the products had. No? So both portfolio were mirrored somehow, and you had one at a given scale and another one with higher resolution, which was the one at the EA. And this is somehow converging after the Sentinel's launch. It has been converging more and more. And we need to see for the next MFF how will this relationship between both entities be. And we are doing that in the frame of this steering group.
Okay, maybe we can come back to that a little bit further. There'll probably be some questions around that topic, but let me turn to Jose and give him the floor to talk a little bit about the status of the in-situ service. I mean, it's very different to all the other services in the sense that it's taking data from many sources. It's using the EEA network. So Jose, tell us a bit about the situation today. What are the challenges and what you see?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Well, first of all, just a clarification that makes sense. Copernicus In-Situ is in itself not a service. It's we call it a component.
Yeah.
In-Situ data activities are carried out by all the different Copernicus Entrusted Entities. They get access to their in-situ data that they need on a daily basis, on an operational basis. And we have excellent examples of huge work done by our colleagues in the different institutions implementing Copernicus, ESA, UMETSAT, ECMWF, Mercator Ocean, Commission, European Commission, EARSC, and so on and so forth. What is the role of the EA in this context is really to provide support across the different trusted entities, particularly when it comes to aspects which are of cross-cutting nature, where there needs a support to facilitate access to in-situ data that is relevant for more than one trusted entity across the program. A few examples of the type of activities that we do at the EA, which is really a minor part of all the in-situ data activities that are done in Copernicus. We try to have a kind of an overview of what are the in-situ data activities, challenges, gaps in Copernicus program, which are many, and I can mention a few afterwards. Also, we try to support the entrusted entities providing access to specific in-situ data. We run some platforms like Copernicus Reference Data Access Portal, which is available for companies working for Copernicus and trusted entities to get access to the data that they need in their activities. We also engage with the huge, big landscape of in-situ data providers, which go from national institutions to European to international research activities, as well as commercial or public authorities. In general, trying to provide advice and support to the Commission on in-situ related topics. There are many challenges currently on in-situ activities. Copernicus is an Earth observation program, meaning that it's not only about satellite, it's satellite plus in-situ data that makes possible the products that we can enjoy and we can produce. But there are still many issues related to accessibility to data. Still, maybe in Europe, we are advancing thanks to the Open Data Directive, High Value Datasets Regulation. but there are still many gaps, particularly when it comes to data outside Europe. And of course, another key aspect as well is that we rely on a number of networks which are already there. It's not Copernicus setting them up. We really rely on existing networks which have their funding, can be either funding at national level, that can be for operations, can be also research funding. And that, of course, creates certain questions, no, ultimately about the sustainability of these networks in the future, particularly when it comes to an operational program like Copernicus. There is more and more demand for in-situ data as well, new products, new missions, also AI, machine learning, all this requires more and more in-situ data, which is essential for the production and validation of the different services, as well as the calibration validation of the satellite missions. So there are many challenges that we have ahead. EA, again, as I said, only has a small part, let's say, trying to support the different entities which really have the bulk of the work on accessing to data. And we are trying to, again, facilitate and enhance this accessibility to in-situ data as much as possible.
So if one of the other entities was looking for a particular type of data for validation purposes or to support, you would help enable that. You would provide guidance and try to help rather than going out and actually getting the data. That would be still their responsibility.
Yeah, let's say we have a kind of a hybrid approach. We can even actually go and try to get the data. But of course, they also have their own networks well established, and they can quickly get to the data. But sometimes, I mean, they look for us to support them, particularly when it comes, for example, to liaise with networks. We have long-standing agreement with the Eurogeographics as the Association of National Mapping Agencies, which is really now facilitating an increased access to geospatial data for mapping services. We also have a very successful agreement with the EUMETNET, the European Association of Meteorological and Hydrological Agencies, which has been instrumental for accessing meteorological and hydrological data for model calibration, model validation in the context of, for example, flood forecasting, and as well in the context of the work done by our colleagues in ECMWF in climate change service. So we try to support, let's say, with in different ways. Corda as well, as I said, is a platform which really allows the service to explore which data is available, even if they're on an operational basis, they need to have it quicker in their own premises and so on.
Yeah. Okay, so that sort of sets out a little bit where we are. What are the factors that are driving your thinking for the sort of the next phase, this evolution and Copernicus 3.0, but particularly this period 28 to 35? What are the things missing today, or trends that you see happening that will define future priorities? What's what's driving the evolution from the CLMS perspective?
I can maybe quickly start. Of course, we have to listen to policy. That's, I think, really key to us. And this is a process which is continuous and which is happening as we speak, almost, I would say. We work very close together here, of course, with the KCO, the Knowledge Center on Earth Observation, which is somehow the link between us and the policy, I would almost say. So collecting, discussing with them the requirements, and then we have to, address how we can then put this into an operational service. Of course, this may mean that there's a need for further research so that there's a need for further, for example, horizon projects, which then in the next step can evolve into an operational product. Usue, maybe I don't know if you have.
No, on that, I think it is so in the past our products were we will not go I will go back a bit. The LULUCF instance from the EA perspective is the only example that we have of a product that we are creating for a specific purpose, which is the LULUCF regulation, and we go up to the last mile with that. No? So what we are discussing now with the different DGs is how to address the different policies, and if we can support them in the same way that we are supporting the LULUCF. And this is very tricky because it goes somehow it clashes with a second objective that we have for the evolution of the service, which is the integration of new technologies and data. So while we need to address these new technologies and data, we need to integrate them in the service. We also need to ensure stability for these products for these policy-oriented products. So what we are thinking is maybe even on the possibility to have some sort of two threads of products, one that would give continuity, that would ensure this stability for these policy support layers, and the other one that would be also more technology driven. So in a way that would follow the times. No? Because of course, I mean, I think that I've seen the people who are here in the meeting. You will probably all of you remember how the integration of Sentinels impacted our portfolio, and we are in some cases in some of our products we are still in a way suffering that increase in the spatial resolution that made our products the time series change, which is something that for the policy support it is very, very important that the time series is stable. And just to finish, the third element for the evolution of the service is on data access and distribution of products. So how to ensure that our users can access our data in an easier way, that they can use it also in an easier way, and in a way try to continue this path that we started in this phase on boosting the user uptake by increasing the capacity of our users, but also by making our data more findable and more accessible.
Do you see the what's the sort of importance? There's going to be more data sources, new Sentinels, new data sources coming through. How much of that is driving your thinking, or is this part of the sort of the more experimental services that I understood you referring to, alongside continuity of established services?
No, it is driving, so that we know that they will come eventually. So we need to prepare ourselves to integrate them. But when we talk about Copernicus, we always need to think that we are operations. And that means that by the time we integrate something, there has been a lot of research in the background that allows us to do so without having a big disruption. What I want to say is that moving towards this more policy support, we need to be maybe extra careful when we integrate this new data, but they will come and we will need to do it. And it's the same with the methodologies, for instance. So in the past, CLMS was mostly on observations. And we see now that we have new technologies and new tools that we also want to take a benefit from. But we need to see how this will affect the portfolio. And of course, for some of our products, we can live with disruptions. It's okay. For some of them, we might not be able to live with them because our key users will find this very, very disruptive, and the credibility of the service then will suffer. But of course, we will integrate them. But it's true. What is true is that the CLMS. So if we moving towards the policy support, we cannot only be driven by technology and new data. That cannot be our only driver. It is part of these drivers, but it's not the only one.
Yeah, that is, if I may add quickly, very valid for the global component, where we are addressing the conventions, the SDGs. Here, it's often more important to have a continuity of time series, to have long time series. Often they're reporting periods starting from the year 2000, for example. This is more important than maybe the highest resolution and having always, new products. It's really about the consistency there and accuracy. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I throw the same sort of question at you, Jose, regarding the sort of the key factors regarding in situ data. Where are the missing or the factors the parts to be improved?
Well, last year we actually prepared what we call a state of play of in situ data in Copernicus. We published it not so long ago in the Copernicus In Situ website for everyone to read, where we point out that 3 main areas where we believe we need to work together, again, with Entrusted Entities and the European Commission in advancing, in improving, let's say, the accessibility to in situ data. Definitely the first one, maybe very obvious, but it's what we call closing the data gaps. And there are different aspects there. Of course, it's building on the developed value data sets. That's really going to be a game changer in terms of data availability for the services. But again, Copernicus is a global program. So we are also encountering challenges when it comes to what so-called data space areas where we still need to have access to more data. For example, the polar regions, to say one of them, or Africa. There are still areas where we need to work towards having more access to data. Sustainability of key networks. Again, the role of, for example, research infrastructures is key in the operations of some of our services. So we need also to address this. The use of alternative data sources can, we rely a lot on open data, but we can also look at other type of data as well, not only public authority, but also private, commercial sector, citizen science. There are different ways to cover these data gaps. The second area is what we call strengthening the partnerships. I think it's very important to acknowledge the role of in situ data providers. In many cases, they, let's say, discover later on that their data is being used in Copernicus. So I think there's a clear need to establish a stronger relation with these data providers to give more visibility to the role of these providers in Copernicus. And finally, as I mentioned before, there are going to be new missions, there are going to be new products. We need to really look at the new demands for in situ data, both for new products in services, but also calibration validation of new satellite missions. Looking also at research and innovation and how we can slowly, little by little, but in a safe way, to take up the new technologies, new developments in the context of in situ observation.
And the access to the data. I want to come back. We're talking very much about technical aspects there, and perhaps address a little bit more policy aspects. But from what you were just saying, Jose, seems to fit in quite well with Pedro's question regarding access to in situ data from other sources and around the world. Pedro, do you want to come in and put your question in your own words? Pedro Matos.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Can you hear me? I couldn't.
Yeah. We hear you.
I work with one of the. First of all, thank you very much. This has been very interesting. I work with one of the UN agencies, the World Food Programme, and we use extensive Copernicus data for like monitoring the work that we do on zero hunger and fighting hunger, etc. But we also have this incredible footprint everywhere, right? We are in 120 countries. Sometimes in those countries we're in the really far, the remote areas, like rural Somalia, rural Sudan. And we're wondering, sometimes when we work, we've done work with JRC, for instance, where their problem is actually having access to in situ data there to validate their satellite images, and we have that footprint, but often we are not part of the projects, right, of the international projects as a user. So I was wondering how, we already use the products that are available for disaster response, but we were wondering if there's an extra role for these large users, but also as contributors, both on the design of the project, but also as contributors. Thank you.
I can jump in now. Then I can.
Jose, yeah.
I can also leave it later on to Andreas or Sue as representatives of
you start off.
a service.
Most relevant.
Yes.
Yourself.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we are aware about the role and the data provision or the potential provision of data of UN agencies and other international organizations. I mean, I don't have it now on top of my head, but definitely the different services are to a larger, different extent working with the UN agencies, collaborating at different level. Of course, I'm thinking of WMO, of course, which is an essential partner in many aspects of the Copernicus program, but at the same with other institutions. I think what is possibly missing, and that's what we really would like to look at in the next phase of Copernicus, is really to give more visibility to the requirements of Copernicus to the different data providers, and also to give visibility to the different trusted entities of which data providers are out there, because sometimes these connections are done on a bilateral basis. Maybe they are done with some entities, but then the others do not know. So one of the ideas that we have maybe in the future is to have a sort of a annual forum of Copernicus In-Situ data providers. That could be an option where we meet together with the different representatives of the entrusted entities and representatives of key international or European networks to discuss cross-cutting elements and to put them in contact. And I think sometimes that is a bit what is missing. Also, we think that maybe that should be, but that of course we need to discuss with the member states and the Commission and entrusted entities. Is there any way in which we can recognize the role of these in situ data providers and put them in a more formal way in contact with the entrusted entities? Yeah, that's something that we need to discuss for the next phase of Copernicus.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe Jose Miguel, you were mentioning forum. We are having in May our General Assembly of the Land Service. This is always a moment where we come together as a service, as the producers, as the user community. It's one moment when, in an informal way, of course, we can talk together on, the products, the fitness for purpose, what, would be good to have in the future. Talking in terms of, global products, at least, we are having a lot of contacts with the various UN agencies. Peter, you mentioned WFP, of course, you have working with us. We shape, for example, products with the FAO. The evapotranspiration product is really very specifically shaped for one of their applications. Of course, we cannot always do this for all type of products, but I think there's a lot of downstream multiplications then, which can happen then after this product. Also the new upcoming global land cover product at 10 meter. Also this FAO, for example, is involved there as one of the stakeholders. So there's definitely a lot of involvement.
Okay. What do you see as being the major policy changes are going to drive? Where are the priority areas that are going to drive this, the needs in 2028 to 2035? I guess I should direct that at you, Andreas, in a sense, because the JRC is sort of core of your work and responsibility. Maybe not you personally, but in
No, yeah.
the JRC.
Yeah, of
You
course.
say I was looking relieved that I asked you, I think.
We see a lot of changes there currently, unfortunately, I must say. Of course, we are the land service. We are more driven towards the environment, and we definitely have to address this. The European the Green Deal is, of course, one of our key driver there.
Yeah.
And there, of course, upcoming regulations like the deforestation regulation, nature law, all this we have to be able to address, and this is where we are, moving to, and not only by, as Ursula was mentioning, variables observation, but really by providing also end products. So really, what is needed then to report on a specific issue. Ursula, if you want to, add
Well,
something on this.
I would like to say, if we knew what is going to happen in the next 10 years, I would go to a better place and probably get rich, because if we think about the last 4 years, it has been quite interesting, or even the last 5 years. So 5 years ago in Spain we were in lockdown, in hard lockdown. So who knows? But it's true that because we are operations, we have some inertia. So what I want to say with this is that since until we put our products into operations, we need time for the research and so on and so forth. We will not see the impact of the new policies or of the new commission or even of the new Trump who might come at some point in some years. But let's see, maybe by the end of the next MFF.
You could push a lot harder on that question, I think, but I'm going to back off for the moment and bring others in. Wolfhard, you've put a number in the chat. I'd like to first of all take the question from Nicholas about in situ and AI. Nicholas, can you tell us where you're from as well?
Thank you very much for taking the question. I'm from Mines Paris, and I'm supporting the EuroGeo project. In the Geo Forum, the focus is on Earth intelligence to support sustainable policies. And by Earth intelligence, it means creating value from the data that we have. In the discussion, when people think about converting Earth observation into Earth intelligence, there is a lot of emphasis on the AI right now, artificial intelligence, and it seems to many to be the silver bullet to solve everything. But in my view, it sort of puts more emphasis on validation and therefore the need for in situ data. So I wanted to ask what's your perspective on that, on this rise of artificial intelligence in our sector, and is there some pressure to increase the access and volume of available in situ data in that respect?
Well, I can. Hi, Nicola. Good to see you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is a clear case for a stronger in situ component. And again, not only what EA does, but in general, in situ activities across the different trusted entities, because I mean, we need ground truth data for the AI models, and I think now it's even more important than ever. So I hope that's what we are trying to do at EA, is really to preach for a strengthened in situ component in the next MFF, to have more, let's say, resources, more support that has more visibility, because definitely we need this type of data to make sure that the AI models give a proper picture of the world, right? So we really need that stronger emphasis on in situ data, definitely.
Yes, it's a big force, but sort of not knowing exactly where we're going. Wolfhard, I'm going to turn to you now.
Right.
You've put 3 questions in the chat. I think it's only 2 questions.
It's actually only 2 questions. You're
3
right.
entries.
Correct.
But let's take kick off with your first one.
Thank you very much, Jeff. If I look at the products, information products that are coming from Land Monitoring Service, land monitoring from Earth observation data, including in situ as a reference, I can see a lot of new applications, a lot of new data, and not data, but geospatial information intelligence users. Now, if you look at the current development, especially with public safety kicking in under climate change, with national security now kicking in new strategic situations, I could see that there will be a lot of more new users, and specifically, I can see the defense, shouldn't say defense sector in terms of the industries, but defense entities, and even DG DEFIS looking at more intelligence information, because whatever you do with land information, there's a lot of intelligence information in it. So that being said, how do you see the roles of JRC, of EEA as entrusted entities change, and how do you see the interaction of these entrusted entities with industries as service providers change over the next coming years, and especially with the new ministerial ahead of us?
Yeah, that's a big challenge there. Of course, JRC is also commissioned, so the link there is very strong. I would like to take it maybe from an example of environmental compliance, which is a big topic, where we had several interesting cases and applications where our data is used, but maybe partly used, because it's at this moment not really ready for some of this. So we need additional information layers, which maybe is also nothing wrong with that. The land service is a starting point, then you add it by, again, in situ data or drone data or ancillary data. But then that's also the concept of, as we just heard about, Earth intelligence comes in. And this is, in fact, where we want to move in the next phase, Copernicus 3.0, to integrate other layers. So, back to not only observation, but also into things like a bit more predictions and things like this. Uswe, maybe you have to add something, or?
No, not much to add, actually. But it's true that so one of the shortcomings that we have had in the past with our products is that we were not going to these last mile applications. And this is something that we are now more and more thinking about moving towards. And this is especially the case for the policy support products. So not so much maybe for others, but when we talk about policy support, what our users are requiring ready-to-use data.
We've got a lot of questions coming into the chat, so I want to move on. Jose, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I can be very quick. I mean, from the in-situ perspective, we need to also look at what the space regulation says when it comes to Copernicus, and it's really that we need to rely as much as possible on member states' capacities. And that's our mantra when it comes to in-situ. Now, having said that, I think it's something to discuss, I don't know, to put it on the table for the next MFF. Do we want to do something to complement these capacities that also look at having more, let's say, strategic autonomy when it comes to in-situ data, building as well on private commercial entities? Yeah, that's something that we may have to consider as well for the next MFF. But again, member states have the last word here, and they are the ones on top of what we are obtaining when it comes to in-situ data.
Okay, Wolf, I'll come back again later, but Stefan Stefan Urovic, can you choose one of your questions, and then we'll maybe come back to the second one later.
Okay, then I'll pick the one about WCAO and CDSE. My understanding, at least when WCAO was launched, was there would be one access point mainly dedicated to access to satellite data, and one WCAO mainly dedicated to the access to the data sets from the Copernicus services. Now there is a movement to integrate all the data from CLMS into as much data as possible from CLMS into WCAO, into CDSE. Therefore, why would anyone go to WCAO in some sense? And I'm asking also because, I guess on behalf of CLMS is part of the tour de table of the shareholders of WCAO.
Yeah, indeed. So indeed, we are part of the we have a four-party agreement for the WCAO development, and together with UMETSAT, ICMWF, and Mercator Ocean. But we also had EARSC also wanted to migrate their data, and EARSC is not part of WCAO. So we are migrating all the CLMS portfolio to CDSE. This will take time. It's not going to happen in the next month, maybe. But because I know that the EARSC is still ongoing, I think they have not finished yet, and we are starting also, so it's a bit complicated. In any case, we are thinking about a federated solution that will is not going to happen, that our data are not going to be visible in WCAO. We are still going to contribute to the WCAO development as part of this four-party agreement, and we are doing it. But our data will not be stored there.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Jeff Smith.
Hi, yeah, hello everyone.
Nice question.
Thanks. Obviously I'm part of the Eagle group, so we've been developing this sort of standard data model for how we characterize landscapes in Europe. But when I was recently at the Biospace meeting at Frascati, one of the sort of real blockers people were seeing was that there's lots of data sets around, but they're not always standardized or harmonized. They can't be integrated, they're not interoperable, etc. And that includes the in-situ data as well, etc. And I just think that kind of Europe is in a good position. We have a continental level that we work at and global level. And we have this work we've done on the Eagle data model and the development of biophysical parameters and the high resolution layers. And so I think for Copernicus 3.0, an opportunity would be to push that kind of standardization where, we take a lead on that and we sort of promote not necessarily the Eagle data model itself, but the sort of concepts there. And use that as a framework for building products on, which can then be used operationally in downstream applications and built on by service providers. So sorry, that's more of a statement than a question, but I'd like to know if you're in favor of that kind of thing moving forwards.
I totally agree. There is, especially not only internally within the land service between EA and JRC, we have to come together when it comes to data standards. But I think this is really critical for the Copernicus services in general. And there's a lot of discussions on this, and the whole discussion on standards. It's a pity my colleague Peter is not here. He could talk for hours about this.
Yes.
But I think it's really critical for ensuring interoperability. And if we're talking about federated systems, it's the fundament. No, if we don't have this, we are really missing out there. So it's really critical at different levels there, really, from the data standards to up of whatever classification standards and similar. Yeah.
In that sense, I would like to also add that we are trying to coordinate also with the other entrusted entities to have more coordinated approach for Copernicus program and Copernicus 3.0, and yes, I agree with your statement.
Thank you.
What more can industry do in that respect? Because I think this is a subject which is quite important for the industry as well.
Well, I think they're part in the discussion groups also. No, when I think of groups like OGC and similar, I think we are sitting there at the same table.
Okay.
So this is important that we talk together.
So there's enough engagement. I think maybe something we need to perhaps think about from our side. Question from Alan Steele.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Well, I made two questions, but the first one was about the In-Situ Component and basically the coverage within the EU for key data sets such as elevation data. I had recent experience collecting such data from member states when I was working on SENS mapping. And of course, the first thing that you will discover, and everybody knows, is that the coverage in Europe is by no means complete. So it's basically about gap filling, and what we can do by asking users, or rather persuading them that it's in their interest to provide this data simply by the argument. I'm sure this case has been put to the member states before, but I wasn't involved. Is there something more that we can do to persuade them to provide such key data sets? Of course, it's not limited to elevation data. By simply stating that they will benefit from the resulting improvement in the services, the improvement not only in the quality, but in the detail of those services.
I can just try to reply. I mean, indeed, we from the EA, as part of our cross-cutting coordination activities, this is on top of our, let's say, priorities to try to improve the accessibility to key data in digital elevation model and other data. Clearly, one of those more required by the different services. For that, in that sense, that's why on one side we established the cooperation service agreement with EOgeographics, where we, with more than around 27 national mapping agencies across Europe, for sharing this data, digital elevation model, or any other type of geospatial reference data that can be of use for Copernicus Emergency Service, Copernicus Land, or even security services. Of course, that's on the agreement, and not all the members of the EOgeographics have signed. I think we have more than half of them are involved now, but of course it takes a bit of time as well to facilitate access to this data. And then, of course, there are many other issues. It's not only about signing. We need to make sure that this data is available. In this case, we are using Corda as the gateway for discovering this data that then we can serve to the different services. We are trying to show as well, not only with the agreements, but also with use cases, how this data is benefiting Copernicus and ultimately as well themselves, no? Because better in-situ data from their countries, it will imply or it will result in better products over that country. Yeah? So that's why we compile a number of use cases. I think more than 40 now available in the in-situ website. We also prepare some specific stories tailored to national mapping agencies just to show the benefit of sharing this data. We, in any case, expect that within the EU, and I repeat myself again, sorry, the implementation of the regulation of the high-value data sets regulation will also improve the availability. But again, this is only EU members, and yeah, Europe is more than that, and of course, Copernicus is global. So I think it's a question of acknowledge the value, putting use cases and best practices on the table, and establish better and stronger partnerships with them.
Partly because some of the countries do not want to share this freely. In other words, they consider it to be commercial data.
Yeah, of course, we need to consider that some mapping agencies have different business models. But again, when it comes to the EU, again, the Open Data Directive will result in a change. With those who are not affected by this, that implies that we need to do some capacity building, explain why it is beneficial. Prepare use cases, stories. Yeah, that's a bit our strategy.
Okay. Thanks for that. Christian Schleicher is You still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm Christian Schleicher from Geovil Company. Thanks for giving me the word and thanks for this interesting presentation. My question is a bit towards the strategy of Copernicus 3.0. I think we heard a bit about that, and that is of highest importance to somehow align the product portfolio on global and European level, maybe even on combining certain products on European level. Is there a high intention for that? And at the same time, I learned that there is a certain need for specialized downstream services to, for policy reason. One example is the LULUCF, which is already kind of operational service, but there are many others. So will there be a focus in Copernicus 3.0 on these more downstream services, or what's the fraction of the work dedicated in 3.0?
Maybe I can start, and Ursula, you can complement. There's certainly a need to address more directly some of the policy components, and this means to have it really more tailored for this. And this, there was a question in the chat. Of course, this we continue doing with the industry. So it's not that we are competing there. We're always working together there, as we're doing now for, let's say, the more, let's call it classic observations. So in a way, there's more opportunities there again. Having said that, Copernicus 3.0. So first thing is the continuity, but then we have to think of and that's what we're doing now in addressing the evolutions in what fields, in what policy dimension. This is this dialogue which we are currently having with the policies in Europe, but eventually also with international bodies, the conventions. No, it's important that we can address some of these components as well there.
What I can add is that we right now do not have an idea of what the share would be between that. In your question in the chat, I see that you mentioned also rather than extend the current service portfolio. I think that also addressing the policies, the policy areas, is in a way extending the portfolio. So I think that the land service has managed now to have a very wide portfolio of products. We could always be doing more, and especially, and this is when we see the integration of new data coming to create maybe new products that we could not create until now because we didn't have the data available, or because we didn't, or because the methodologies were not ready for it. I'm thinking about we are in the EA through the European Topic Center. We are investigating some of the new contributing missions that are using thermal data, for instance. So these type of things. But in general, we are now in the process of gathering the user requirements for the evolution, and more than for the evolution, because the driving lines we already know. More than that is to know how these driving lines will actually be implemented. And this needs to be done jointly. So not only between the CLMS, not only between Andreas and myself, but also taking into consideration Jose Miguel, taking into consideration In-Situ, taking the DGs into consideration, or the other entrusted entities with the other services. So how will the implementation of these 3 driving lines be? This is something at this point we don't really know. We have some ideas, but we don't know how will it look in practice. That's what I want to say.
Okay, we've reached our hour and even gone a little bit beyond. So I know there are still some questions, and hopefully we can address those in the after chat. If the 3 of you are able to stay online, that would be great. But if you need to leave, then quite understand. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a lively EOcafe, which is great. And as I said, we've still got questions that we haven't answered. So thank you, Usea, Andrea, and Jose for your participation. Thank you everybody who's joined for your participation as well. I think it's been a very interesting discussion, and a number of points there that we could certainly take on and continue the discussion. But I will close the formal part of the call at this point. We'll turn off the recording.